Chapter 2. I will begin by saying that Prince K was not so extraordinarily aged, but yet he was so decrepit, so worn out, that as one looked at him the thought instinctively occurred to one that in another minute he might drop to pieces. Extremely queer stories of the most fantastic kind were repeated in Mordassov about this prince. People even said that the old man was off his head. Everyone thought it very strange that the owner of an estate of 4,000 serfs, a man of distinguished family, who might, if he had chosen, have had a great influence in the province, should live in solitude on his magnificent estate, a complete hermit. Many had known Prince K when he was staying in Mordassov 6 or 7 years before, and they declared that in those days he could not endure solitude, and had not the faintest resemblance to a hermit. All that I could ascertain about him, on good authority, however, was this. In his young days, which were, however, long ago, the prince had made a brilliant debut. He had led a gay life, flirted, had made several tours abroad, sang songs, made puns, and had at no period been distinguished by the brilliance of his intellectual gifts. Of course he had squandered all his fortune, and found himself in his old age without a farthing. Someone advised him to visit his estate, which was beginning to be sold by auction. He set off and arrived at Mordassov, where he stayed 6 months. He liked provincial life extremely. During those 6 months he dissipated all he had left to the last halfpenny, spending his whole time in gambling and getting up various intrigues with the ladies of the province. He was, moreover, extremely good-natured, though of course not without a certain princely air, which was, however, regarded in Mordassov as characteristic of the highest society. And so, instead of annoying people, it positively impressed them favorably. The ladies especially were in perpetual ecstasy over their charming visitor. A number of curious reminiscences of him were preserved. People said, among other things, that the prince spent more than half the day over his toilet, and was, it appeared, entirely made up of different little bits. No one knew when and where he had managed to become so dilapidated. He wore a wig, moustaches, whiskers, and even a little imperial, every hair of it false, and of a magnificent black colour. He rouged and powdered every day. It was said that he had little springs to smooth away the wrinkles on his face, and these springs were in some peculiar way concealed in his hair. It was asserted, too, that he wore corsets, because he had lost a rib jumping somewhat clumsily out of a window on one of his amorous adventures in Italy. He limped with the left leg. It was maintained that the leg in question was an artificial one, and that the real one had been broken in the course of another similar adventure in Paris, and that he had been provided with a new cork leg of a special pattern. But what will people not say? It certainly was true that his right eye was a glass one, though it was a most skilful imitation. His teeth, too, were false. He spent whole days washing in various patent waters, scenting and pomading himself. It was recalled, however, that even then the prince was perceptibly beginning to grow feeble, and that he had become insufferably garrulous. It seemed as though his career were drawing to its close. Everyone knew that he had not a farthing. And all of a sudden, quite unexpectedly, one of his nearest relations, a very aged lady who had lived for many years in Paris and from whom he could have had no expectations, died just a month after the funeral of her legal heir. The prince found himself quite unexpectedly the heir to her fortune. A magnificent estate of 4,000 serfs, about 40 miles from Mordassov, all came to him. He at once prepared to go to Petersburg to settle his affairs. Our ladies got up a magnificent subscription dinner in his honor. It is recalled that the prince was enchantingly gay at this farewell banquet. He made puns, made everyone laugh, told the most extraordinary anecdotes, vowed that he would return as quickly as possible to Duhanovo, his new property, and promised that on his return there would be a continual round of fêtes, picnics, balls, and fireworks. For a whole year after his departure, the ladies talked of this promise and awaited their charming old friend with immense impatience. While awaiting his return, they even made up parties to Duhanovo, where there was an old-world manor house and garden, with acacias lopped into the shape of lions, with artificial mounds, with lakes upon which boats sailed up and down, with wooden images of Turks playing a pipe for figureheads, with arbors, with pavilions, with pleasure grounds and other attractions. At last the prince returned, but to the general surprise and disappointment, he did not even call at Mordassov on his way, but settled at Duhanovo and lived like a hermit. Strange rumors began to circulate, and altogether from that period the prince's history became obscure and fantastic. To begin with, it was asserted that he had not been altogether successful in Petersburg, that some of his relations and future heirs tried to take advantage of the prince's mental feebleness in order to get him put under some sort of supervision, fearing that he would squander everything again. What was more, some people declared that they had tried to put him in a lunatic asylum, but that one of his relations, a gentleman of consequence, had taken his part, explaining frankly to the others that the poor prince, half dead and half a dummy already, would probably soon die together, and then the property would come to them without the help of a lunatic asylum. I repeat again, what will not people say, especially in our town, Mordassov? All this, so it was said, scared the prince terribly, so much so that he became a transformed character and turned into a hermit. Some of the Mordassov gentry went from curiosity to call upon him, but were either not received or met with a very strange reception. The prince did not even recognize his old acquaintances. It was asserted that he did not want to recognize them. The governor, too, paid him a visit. He returned with the news that in his opinion the prince really was a little off his head, and ever afterwards he made a wry face at any allusion to his visit to Duhanovo. The ladies were loud in their indignation. At last a fact of prime importance was discovered, namely that the prince was entirely in the power of one Stepanida Matveyevna, a woman no one knew anything about, who had come with him from Petersburg, was stout and elderly, and went about in cotton dresses with the keys in her hands, that the prince obeyed her in everything like a child, and did not dare to take a step without her permission, that she even washed him with her own hands, that she spoilt him, dandled him, and comforted him like a child, and that finally she kept away from him all visitors, and especially the relations who had been gradually beginning to visit Duhanovo to see how things were going. People in Mordassov discussed this incomprehensible relationship a great deal, especially the ladies. It was added that Stepanida Matveyevna had unchecked and independent control of the prince's whole estate, that she dismissed the stewards, the bailiffs, and the servants, and collected the revenues, but that she ruled it well, and so that the peasants blessed their fate. As regards the prince himself, it was learned that his days were spent almost entirely on his toilet, in trying on wigs and dress coats, that he spent the rest of his time with Stepanida Matveyevna, that he played his game of cards with her, tried his fortune with the cards, only now and then going for a ride on a quiet English mare, on which occasion Stepanida Matveyevna invariably accompanied him in a closed chaise in case of mishap, for the prince rode on horseback chiefly for effect, and could hardly keep in the saddle. He was sometimes seen also on foot, wearing an overcoat and wide-brimmed straw hat, with a lady's pink neckerchief round his neck, with an eyeglass in his eye, and a wicker basket for mushrooms, cornflowers, and other wild flowers. Stepanida Matveyevna always accompanied him, while behind them walked 2 tall footmen, and the carriage followed to be ready in case of need. When he was met by a peasant, who stepped aside, took off his hat, bowed low, and said, "Good day, Prince, your Excellency, our sunshine," the prince promptly turned his lorgnette upon him, nodded graciously, and said to him affably, "Bonjour, mon ami, bonjour." Many such rumours were current in Mordassov. They could not forget the prince. He was such a near neighbour. What was the general amazement when one fine day there was a report that the prince, the eccentric hermit, had arrived in Mordassov in person and was staying at Marya Alexandrovna's. All was bustle and excitement. Everyone was eager for an explanation. All asked one another what it meant. Some prepared to call on Marya Alexandrovna. The prince's arrival struck everyone as a wonder. The ladies sent one another notes, prepared to call on one another, sent their maids and their husbands to make inquiries. It seemed particularly strange and hard to understand why the prince should stay at Marya Alexandrovna's rather than at anyone else's. Anna Nikolaevna Antipov was particularly annoyed because the prince was a very distant relation of hers. But to solve all these questions, it is absolutely necessary to call on Marya Alexandrovna herself, and we cordially invite the kind reader to do so. It is true that it is only 10 o'clock in the morning, but I don't think she will refuse to receive an intimate friend. Us, at any rate, she will certainly admit. Breaking in. The mystery of who Stepanida Matveyevna is and how she came to her extraordinary position at Duhanovo is never explained. On the one hand, it might seem like she is the self-interested winner in a remarkable power play, and that seems to be the interpretation given by the characters we encounter in the story. On the other hand, she may seem like something of a saint, saving Prince K from his own profligacy and the asylum, while diligently looking after his well-being during his dotage. Since she is the one who has barred access to the prince for 6 years, she is viewed unfavorably in Mordassov. She will often be referred to obliquely as "that terrible woman," or by similar expressions in what follows. End of comments.